What if you could transform your interview anxiety and use it to your advantage? Well, I've gone to the Indeed Career Coaches, and I'm here to share 4 of their powerful tips that you can immediately use to feel more confident in an interview. Be sure to stick around to the end where I'll explain how to correct course if you find yourself straying off and being nervous in the interview room. All right, let's get started. Tip 1 is to visualize your success. Okay, I know this sounds cheesy to many people, but it's actually very rational if you think about it. Anxiety often floods us with many mental images of worst case scenarios. And the only way to really combat that, if we want to fight off those images, is to show ourselves the opposite. Imagine yourself winning. Imagine yourself sitting dressed for success across from an interviewer, feeling confident, delivering really strong answers. And the trick here is, in visualizing that success, you have to convince yourself that you really are the best person for the role. Explore why that is. That alone will help you in the interview, even if you can't do this visualization exercise. If you've watched this far, please give us a like down below, hit that subscribe button, and make sure to turn on notifications. All right, tip 2 is to fight the fear of being caught off guard by preparing thoroughly. Now, I will say that it's absolutely normal to feel afraid of being blindsided in an interview, no matter how much you've done to prepare. This fear often heightens when we feel like we're walking into an interview room and, we feel like, ooh, I could have done more. So the way to combat this is to give yourself a leg up by preparing thoroughly on a number of levels, which I'll get into here. It's highly recommended to conduct strong research on the job, the company, and the interviewer if you have that information. Now, if you're in a time crunch and you really feel like you have to prioritize one of those 3, I'd really recommend focusing on the job description, because this is the opportunity that an employer takes to explicitly tell you what they're looking for from a candidate. So review the job description, hone in on those keywords and phrases that talk about the desired accomplishments, experience, and preferred and required qualifications. Now, feeling prepared is about more than just research, of course. I always recommend, if it's an in-person interview, looking at the drive time, potential traffic, considering where you're going to park or how you're getting there. And if it's a video interview or phone interview, test your connections and make sure you're in a calm and professional space for that interview. And in all cases, it's always useful to bring at least 2 copies of any professional materials that you'd like to have, just for easy reference for both you and the employer. So the final key component of feeling really prepared for an interview is to project a professional presence. What I mean by that is 2 things. The first is that we're dressing for the job we want in clothes that still make us feel like us. And if you're ever worried about over or under dressing, check out the company's social feed. If there's any behind the scenes looks of what employees are wearing there on the day-to-day, that's great. Just take that up a notch in formality. And if you can't find any of that information, the best case is just to default to business casual. The second thing I'm referring to here is cultivating an air of professionality that you feel strong in. So if you're wondering what I mean by that, think about professionals that you admire or the traits that they're discussing in the job description. Things like approachable, calm, adaptable, respectful, and remind yourself that that's what you are and that that's the air that you're bringing into the interview room. If you're still feeling a bit nervous after having taken all these steps, that is perfectly normal, but it's the anxiety talking. It really is. So just critically combat that inner voice by reminding yourself what you've done to prepare, and know that you can walk into the interview room having given yourself your best shot by doing all you can do. And more than that, remind yourself as to why you really deserve this opportunity. Again, if you have not convinced yourself that you are the best person for this role, you cannot convince an employer of that. So remind yourself about the compelling professional offering that you provide and why you deserve this role. Now, if you do still find yourself blindsided or taken back in an interview, our next tip will really help you. But first, if you want more advice on how to thoroughly prepare for an interview and research, I'd recommend checking out this video about the best pre-interview strategy. Tip number 3, there is power in taking a pause. Now, let's face it, and I've been there before, when an employer asks us a question, we sometimes feel like we need to respond immediately. And there's reason for that. We want to seem like we've prepared thoroughly and have every answer to every question. But our tendency to shy away from silence in an interview can actually lead us down the wrong path. First of all, it doesn't give us the time to formulate a thoughtful answer as well as we could if we'd taken a beat. In our effort to seem prepared, we can actually come across to the interviewer as nervous, reactive, rather than reflective, and even in some cases afraid to take control of the interview room. So if you're rushing for an interview or you find yourself taken aback from an unexpected question, remember the power of the pause. You can always say, "That is a really good question. Let me think about that for a moment," and take that moment to think. This actually communicates thoughtfulness, confidence, and a willingness to control the pace of the dialogue. And the same holds true for a question that you don't understand or that you misheard. You can always say, "Could you please repeat the question?" Or, "Can you clarify what you're saying here? I really want to make sure I understand what you're asking." These things at first might make us feel like, "Oh, I'm being awkward or I'm being weak by asking this," but in actuality, they communicate a poise, intelligence, and a deliberateness that a rushed response often lacks. For more advice on what to avoid doing in an interview, things like rushing, but we go further in depth, check out this video right here. Tip 4 is to remember to breathe. Now, this might seem like another no-brainer tip, but in reality, it's really important and pretty impactful. Part of the symptoms of anxiety, if you're familiar with it, is shallow, quick breathing. And sometimes if we're creating that physical state for ourselves, it can actually heighten and trick ourselves into feeling even more anxious emotions than we were feeling in the first place. So I always recommend before going into an interview, take a second and check in, breathe calmly. There's so many great techniques out there. One of them that I like is called boxed breathing, where you breathe in for a number of counts, hold for that same number of counts, and then exhale for that same number of counts. But there's many, so just find what works for you or keep it simple. Just take some calm, deep breaths, remind your body, hey, this is no big deal and I've got this. Now, this also applies to the interview room. Of course, in the interview room, you're probably going to be too caught up intellectually to be really consciously controlling your breathing. But one of the best ways you can set yourself up for great breathing in an interview room is to sit up tall and straight. Again, if we slump or if we shrink our bodies, that actually compresses the lungs and can make it harder to breathe, which again can just make us more anxious. So in moments of pause during the interview, check in with yourself, make sure your shoulders are open, you're standing tall, like there's a balloon pulling from the top of your head, and check in with your breath if you have a moment every now and then, if there's a lull. Just make sure that you're breathing calmly and that you feel like you're in control. Now, as promised at the beginning, I have a little piece of advice for what to do if you feel like you've lost focus in your response and you're sort of rambling in an interview. What I'd recommend doing is just taking a moment, take that pause, right? And then recap what you've just said. Basically hit restart on what that question was and keep it concise. So just press that reset button and know it's okay basically just to start over and then provide a quick, short, impactful response. All right, now let's do a quick recap of the 5 tips I've provided to help you confidently walk into any interview room. Tip 1 is to visualize your success. Fight those negative self-images that anxiety can provide by showing yourself images of success. Make sure you've really convinced yourself that you're the right person for the role. 2 is to fight the fear of being caught off guard by preparing thoroughly. 3 is to leverage the power of the pause. If we allow ourselves a second to think, we can provide better responses and communicate with a lot more poise. 4 is remember to breathe. Don't allow yourself to breathe shallowly or hunch over and restrict your lungs. Make sure that you have good posture, and that will help you fuel your confidence throughout the interview. And 5, if you find yourself rambling or off track, don't be afraid to just take a pause, restart, and recap your answer. If you found this video helpful, please give us a like down below. You can subscribe to our channel right here and check out more interviewing tips in this playlist right here. And if you'd like some advice on how to answer the 10 trickiest interview questions, check this video out right here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.